The Blue Jays sweep the Mariners in their own building thanks to the offense for once. Specifically, George Springer, Bo Bichette, and probably the best weekend of Addison Barger's pro career. We're going to break that down, and the Blue Jays after 40 games after this.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Blue Jays Center.
Bautista drives it deep left field. Gone!
The sickest Toronto Blue Jays podcast. It's gonna be sick.
I'm Cole Whiston alongside Ron Pentelman, and coming up in this show, we're going to talk about our preseason over-unders. We're going to tell you who the Jays' best players are after 40 games. We're going to preview the upcoming homestand, and we're also going to talk about what this lineup should look like going forward after an offensive outburst over the weekend. And that's where we start. The Jays sweep the Mariners in Seattle, Rob. And finally, it was because of the bats.
Yeah, it was odd because you have that Angels series, which I'll be honest, after that second Angels game, I just sort of put my hands up and I said, you know what? Crazier things have happened. This team could still, make a little bit of a run here this season. It could still be salvaged, but not that many crazier things because this team looked awful, Prof. This team looked awful Tuesday night, or when was it? Wednesday night in Anaheim. They were on the verge of getting swept by the Angels. How much have we how often have we spoken this whole season about how the schedule is tough, but once we get to that easier stretch, those tomato can teams, that's what will make up distance in the standings. And the Angels are the tomato can of tomato cans. They are as bad of a team as there is in the American League. And yet they were on the verge of getting swept by them. Everything looked awful. The offense was pathetic. The back end of the bullpen looked absolute gas. The one tangible thing all year that you pointed at and said, that is a legitimate strength for this team. It looked like they were gassed in the first week of May. And of course, after you throw your hands up and sort of bury dirt in the casket, why wouldn't they win 4 straight, score 29 runs in 4 games, and go to the hottest team in baseball in their home ballpark and sweep them? Because that's what the Jays are. They just pull you back in. The 2025, just like the last few years, the 2025 Blue Jays are a roller coaster. And right now we're riding a peak, so I'm happy about it, man. How about you?
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it just doesn't make any sense that the Jays would walk into one of the most pitcher-friendly ballparks and have their best offensive output of the season. And shout out to our favorite American sports talk show, and I'm going to specifically call out Chris Broussard. This is what the Jays did this weekend. They walked into the Seattle Mariners' house. They sat on their couch. They kicked their feet up on the coffee table with their shoes on and made the Mariners make them a sandwich. And it came with a soda pop. That's what the Jays did. That's what the Jays did this weekend with Seattle. Going into May, the Jays scored 3.6 runs per game. In May, which we all said on this podcast that if there's any bright spot about the future of this team, it is that May is significantly better than April in regards to individual players' performances on our team. And so far in May, we're averaging 5.2 runs a game. The offense has been on fire. And like you said, Rob, the main reason why the Angels series went the way it went wasn't necessarily because the offense didn't show up. It was because the bullpen and the pitching staff has been so taxed over the first month that regardless of any offensive output, it might not be enough. You might still dig yourself into a hole regardless of what's coming out of the production standpoint. So luckily, that didn't continue in Seattle. And yeah, the vibes couldn't be any higher going into a 9-game home stand, which will be tough, but has some favorable matchups that we'll get into later. But I think the one thing that we have to, point out here is Addison Barger, a guy that everybody believes should be an everyday player for this team, but the results weren't there. The tools are there, the raw talent is there, but the results weren't there until this weekend. And now all of a sudden, this might come as a surprise to you. Guess where he ranks amongst average exit velocity in the entire big leagues?
It was third because I heard
Third. Yeah.
I heard on Blue Jays Talk Plus today. Thanks for Blake Murphy for providing that stat. So yeah, Addison Barger's been awesome, and it's great to happen sort of in his home ballpark. I know he's kind of moved around early on. We talked to him last year in Buffalo, but his Wikipedia page at least says he's born in Bellevue, Washington. Which, having been in the Seattle area, I know it's just a short freeway ride up from T-Mobile Park. So sort of in his hometown, I guess, kind of breaking out there. Nice to see that, and all of a sudden now remember, Professor, and we're going to talk about our over unders later on in the show. But one of our props was the Blue Jays would need one of sort of the Buffalo boys to come out and be a real impact for them this season. Sort of have that. Can a guy come up within the pipeline and be a legitimate everyday big league bat for them? And Alan Roden was sort of our bet at the beginning of the year because he was the guy who got the opening day nod
Right.
over Addison Barger or Elvis Martinez or these guys. But right now, it looks like Addison Barger is the favorite. If there's going to be a guy, of course, obviously a lot of season left and small sample, but Addison Barger looks like the guy who's going to be the favorite to take that crown because of how well he's been hitting the ball, as you mentioned. The bat to ball metrics are just insane. He's not a qualified hitter across the major leagues right now, but his baseball savant page bleeds red in all aspects. He's the guy that at this point, he's got to be playing every day at this point, foreseeable future, at the very least, against righties. And right now, Tampa and Detroit, our next two series, is going to be a right-handed heavy in terms of pitching matchup. So expect Addison Barger to be playing, whether that's at third base or in right field. He's made a major impact, and that was his best series of his career. And his overall now, his raw numbers on the year all look terrific now. He's above the league average hitter. That piss missile that he had yesterday, I mean, it got out of there quick, man. It was nice. Yep. It was a lot of fun to watch, and hopefully it continues because we all know the Blue Jays, they're in no surplus of hitters. So if you can get a guy who can hit the ball hard, and especially from the left side, they'll take it. They'll take it every day of the week.
And I think the best way to segue from that is what does the best lineup look like going forward for this Toronto Blue Jays, because you have guys like Nathan Lucas and Miles Straw both making a significant impact, whether it be on the offense or on the defense. You have guys like Ernie Clement, who are still a very serviceable big league talent right now for this team. And you also have Tyler Heineman, who, despite playing a flat out backup role, in that backup role has been very successful. So I think there's a ton of opinions people have out there for what this lineup should look like going forward. And I think I have my answer. And this is, keep in mind, over the Seattle series, we didn't have Anthony Santander or Andres Jimenez for all three games. That's the crazy thing.
Dalton Varsho the last game too.
And Dalton Varsho for the last game as well. A crazy anomaly when you think about it, that the team's best offensive output came without the team's best offensive offseason acquisition in Anthony Santander, who was, right, had an abysmal start to the year. But the lineup for me looks like this. Everyday spots from Nathan Lucas and Miles Straw. Not the two of them. One of them has to be in the lineup every day. One of them has to be in the lineup every day. One of Addison Barger Addison Barger should be in the lineup every day at third base, and Ernie Clement is the odd man out here. I think he should move to a bench role / platoon role, only in favorable matchups. And obviously I still have Heineman being a backup catcher because Kirk has also been producing above his at least last season's offensive output. So Kirk looks like he's back, so he can stay in the everyday role. You have to DH Santander. This is me including Santander and Andres Jimenez in this hypothetical scenario, and Dalton Varsho, obviously. So you don't have many spots to play with, but I think you can platoon Lucas and Straw since they both hits from opposite sides of the plate, and they both serve the same purpose in terms of, high defense metrics. And then Addison Barger, has to play every day. Ernie Clement is the odd man out, which going into the year, he would have been your everyday third baseman. But I think that should now shift to Addison Barger.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, first of all, for the most part. And I do think that, Andres Jimenez, when he comes back, he's obviously going to assume everyday roles at second base. I'll put a damper on it because I know that this is always a fun topic when it comes to these sort of things, these podcasts, things for engagement about what would the optimal lineup look like. But the reality is, if you look at, we'll do last season because it's the most recent full season sample, the Blue Jays used like over 140 different lineup combinations in 162 games. Like the reality is that as fun as this is to do, these things work itself out. Every day there's always going to be someone who's going to need a day off. Every day is going to be a pitch matchup dependent. The bottom of every lineup, regardless of who you are, whether you're the Dodgers or whatever, typically the bottom of every lineup is going to be missed and matched every day, regardless of who's depending on who's on the mound for the other team. So I would agree with you. I think that I don't want to get too caught up in the permutations of, what would an optimal lineup be. But yeah, I think for the most part, you got it right there. I think that Addison Barger, like I mentioned, should be playing every day. I think that regardless of regardless of who's on the mound, whether it's a righty on the mound, you'd probably throw with Nathan Lucas in center field or move him to a corner outfield, have Varsho play center field, obviously, and then obviously have Miles Straw in there if there's a righty on the mound, or pardon me, yeah, if there's a lefty on the mound, have Miles Straw. If there's a righty, bring in Nathan Lucas. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I don't think there's a lot of disagreement from my end.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess the better question is right now there's a lot of people who think that possibly there should be a shift in how the top four go, whether it should remain Bo and Vlad and Anthony Santander and then George Springer. Um, for me, I know I said on the last podcast that four for me has a leash until the end of this homestand, because I think that's a proper sample size of seeing the
So,
top
so
four.
who gets debunked then? You said he has a leash, but who gets debunked? Santander,
Santander has a leash,
hypothetically, because he's the worst of the four. But
right?
who gets?
So what I would do is I would switch. I'd go with whoever you trust as your best lefty in the number two spot. I would leave Bo at number one. Whoever you think is your best lefty at number two, Vlad at number three, and then I think you have the option, depending on where George Springer stands at that point, to go George Springer still at the cleanup spot, and then have Anthony Santander at five, which I know people aren't going to like. So in my opinion, I'd probably go Santander four, Springer five, because then it still gives Santander some lineup protection if Springer is still swinging a hot bat.
Yeah, that's good in theory, but you said that your best lefty. I still think Anthony Santander is their best lefty. Yeah, I still think he's their most powerful lefty that has the highest upside. Obviously, Addison Barger's cool
Right,
and all. It's in
if
a
he's
series.
but if
Like,
he's
yeah,
gonna be but if he's gonna be a below like league average hitter and your most important spots, then you can't keep running him out there in the top three.
I understand, but you don't have. I don't think you have an above league average hitter.
Addison Barger's an above league average hitter.
Right now, he is. Yes, Addison
Right, that's
Barger
what
a
I'm
week
saying.
ago. If you snapshot Addison Barger's numbers a week ago, you think that he should be sent out. All this stuff changes. I'm not ready to move Addison Barger
No,
second in the
and neither
order
mine. Neither
over
mine. I
Anthony
said
Santander.
neither mine. I said at the end of this homestand, you get a better picture on where you stand, and that's assuming.
Nah,
That's
to me,
assuming
that's not enough. That's not enough of a sample. Obviously, like
it'll be
we
about
love
it'll be
Addison
about
Barger.
it'll be close to 200 at bats. That like we'll be at 49 games into the season. Like that's at some point your runners in scoring position, and it keep coming up Anthony Santander and him keep coming up not getting the job done. If you're gonna compete for a wild card spot, you need to make a change.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that as great as Addison Barger looked this series, it's one series. I think that he like I mentioned, it was such a quick turnaround. The sample is just too small. Right now, we don't have evidence that Addison Barger can be a legitimate impact bat. He's an above average hitter today, but can he be an impact bat over a larger sample? To me, giving it 1 week is not sufficient. I think Anthony Santander typically is like this is who he is. He's a slow starter who typically heats up at this time of year, and ultimately you paid for him, bought him, you signed him with that in mind. You signed him with that in mind that he would be probably a May to August type of hitter that he would get off to a slow start, maybe a slow finish as well, but ultimately the summer months he could hit 30, 40 home runs. Addison Barger is great. It was his first home run of the year yesterday. We have no evidence that he can be a legitimate impact player at the major leagues. There are a lot of indicators that would suggest that it's possible, but ultimately, right now, I'm not ready. I'm not prepared to move him up 3 spots in the order and make him your everyday second hitter. I think that's a little bit too ambitious for my liking.
So then your solution is to have Anthony Santander continue to go out there and not come up in clutch spots.
Yes, because
Okay,
ultimately, I
fair
think
enough.
that you have to roll the dice. I think ultimately you have to listen to the back of the baseball card, and obviously, like if that continues for a longer sample, then yeah, obviously, I think that at that point you have to make a change. But I think that giving it one more week is not like to me. It's
Well, it's 2 more
if
weeks.
you're
Yeah.
prepared to make that drastic of a shift next week, you should be prepared to make that today. Would you like move Anthony Santander to fifth today?
No, not today. I said, and I wouldn't move him to fifth in 2 weeks either. I'd move him to fourth because I still want somebody who's swinging a hot bat behind him, and I agree with the fact that he's a switch hitter. He should be still in your top four as your quote unquote best power hitter over a career sample size. So yeah, I would have him at fourth. The problem is right now he's a large chunk to the reason as to why this offense has not been living up to expectations so far, and I just think that at some point, especially over what's supposed to be his best month or one of his best months in his career splits in May. Now he hasn't played 3 games in May so
Right.
far, so
That matters.
he is expected back Tuesday to start the homestand. So hopefully that happens, and then yeah, at the end of these 9 games, I think that this is all dependent. This is dependent on if somebody else I think could take that role. But again, what I am saying is your worst hitter can't be your third hitter, and that's Anthony Santander right now.
He is right now. He is, but I think that
Yeah,
ultimately a big part of what you're building your team, you have to build it on the premise of projections. And obviously Anthony Santander today is a worst everyday hitter, but he obviously doesn't project to be their worst everyday hitter by the end of the year. He projects
yeah,
to be coming into the season their second best hitter coming into the year, right? So that's obviously something you have to keep in mind. It's not about what's going on right now; it's about
yeah,
who you project to be better. And right
yeah.
now, despite what Addison Barger has, I would still significantly bet that by the end of the year, Anthony Santander will be a better hitter than Addison Barger. So ultimately, by that projection, I'm not moving him down. I'm not moving Addison up over him at this point.
That's fine. And keep in mind that I'm talking about the number 2 spot as which in tradition holds like not a lot of value. It's just about a guy who can put the ball in play and isn't and has a power upside and doesn't strike out a lot and isn't going to be just a liability at the dish. So this all depends on where Addison Barger is. But how about this? What if you just switch Vlad and Santander?
What do you mean, like move
Because then
Santander at 2 and then hit Vlad
hit
3?
Vlad third. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know that either, honestly, because I'm not of that school of thought of traditional archetypes for leadoff hitters or second hitters. Like your leadoff hitter has to be a speedy guy who gets on and steals bases. Like to me, it's more so I want my better hitters. I want my best hitters hitting as high in the order as possible. And I think Vlad's better than Santander, so
mm,
I wouldn't move him that way either. Like that's to me. I guess we just come from different schools of thoughts. But ultimately, yeah, no, I'm not for that either. I think that Bo Bichette and Vlad might be you may be able to sway me that way. I've obviously hit Vlad leadoff, which that's something that we've never talked about before. But
yeah.
I think that would be a more interesting debate for me personally than have Vlad move below Santander. But ultimately, I think that we may be a little too we may be shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic a little bit too much. I think ultimately you just need your guys to hit. You just need your guys to perform, and ultimately, as we saw in 2021, doesn't matter what permutation you throw out there. If your guys are hitting, then it doesn't really matter all that much. But yeah, I think it's a nice little back and forth we had there.
So after 40 games, the Jays sit at 20-20 because of course they do. A team that we project to finish right around 500 is
Yep.
exactly 500 after the first quarter of the season. So I want to get your reactions after 40 games.
You're asking me now after probably the best stretch we've seen in 2 years. I mean, I'll say I'm kind of bullish. I would say ultimately it feels like really bad analysis that literally 4 days ago I was pouring dirt on them, and now all of a sudden I'm saying, you know what, maybe it's not that bad. But ultimately, the reality is, man, is that they're okay. They're in an okay spot. They're a game out of a playoff spot. They're 3 games out back of the division, and a division that's very wide open. If you gave every a fan of every American League East team the truth serum, they would all say to a degree that their team has been somewhat underwhelming, especially the Orioles, which by the way, I called that. I said that they would be the worst team in this division, and they're going to be. They're going to be the worst record in the AL East because that rotation is not major league caliber. But anyways, uh, the reality is that forever you have to be well above 500 to have a shot. But if the Blue Jays win tomorrow against Tampa, they'll be 21-20, which puts them on pace for an 84-85 win team, which is right there for the third wild card. That's basically what the third wild card has been the last few years. So, yeah, the reality is that as frustrating and unwatchable as this team has been at times during this 40 game stretch, all they have to do is play marginally better the rest of the year than they played to this point, and they'll be right there for a playoff spot. That is just the reality of the environment of what baseball is, and that you don't have to be a great team to make the playoffs or be competitive anymore. As long as you're what the Jays are around 500, you'll be in until pretty much the end of the year. So I think if you're a Blue Jays fan, you can take solace in that, and glass half full. That despite that this year hasn't always gone to plan and it hasn't always been fun to watch or great quality of baseball, that it doesn't have to be that much better to get to where you want to be. And yeah, so ultimately, I hate to say it because it doesn't feel that way, but I feel somewhat okay about this ball club.
And I think that it's funny if you're 500. I think the best way for me to describe this and give fans a perspective on the 500 is to do it in two ways. I'll give you evidence that supports Rob's bullish expectations the rest of the way, and I'll play devil's advocate with you. The fact that we're 500 and Anthony Santander and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are not hitting balls over the wall at the pace that they should be. Both of them are on pace to be under their career averages, or at least over their best career averages. If this continues the rest of the way, obviously they only have 5 home runs each, and that's on pace for 20 home runs if you extrapolate it to 162 games. So both of those would be significant disappointments. And the fact that your rotation has at least held pat. Here's the thing, to play devil's advocate though. Your bullpen is the 10th best in baseball, and that was not an expectation from anybody. Even on this podcast, we set the line at 18.5 Fangraphs WAR ranking, and they've currently ranked 10th on Fangraphs in bullpen WAR. So that would have been an exceeded expectations ending to the bullpen. Also, George Springer was not expected to be this. So you can argue that the production you've gotten from Springer kind of outdoes the production that you were expecting from Vlad or Santander. So that's just playing both sides of the fence, because at 500, that's what you have to do. I think the biggest thing to be worried about the rest of the way is, surprisingly, not the offense. It's probably the starting rotation. Max Scherzer has pitched 3 innings for this team. He was slotted in to be their 3rd best starter because he was supposed to start the 3rd game of the season, and he's pitched 3 innings. And on top of that, Bowden Francis looks like the book is kind of out on him, or at least he is at best a serviceable 5th starter guy. And you're right now, for the time being, until Max Scherzer has a timetable to return, you're going to run out Jose Urena and Eric Lauer in your 5th spot every 5 days. So, fun enough that the reason why the Jays are 500 and not above 500 is because of the offense, but the reason why we should be worried about the rest of the season is because of the pitching rotation.
Yeah, it's interesting there. You mentioned, I think that's a good point there about the rotation, because obviously that 4-5 looks pretty vulnerable. Bowden Francis was a little bit better his last start, so hopefully that bodes well, that maybe perhaps he could, like you mentioned, be
I don't want to. I know, but I don't want to give it too much credit. It was in Seattle, and I was anticipating him to have a pretty good to competent game in Seattle because it is the most pitcher-friendly ballpark.
And also, like, there were some, like, there's a little bit of good fortune there. If you look at the exit deals from some of the Mariners hitters, that's a little dubious of what it could happen over a larger sample, which basically has been the theme of Bowden Francis's whole Linsanity run here the last however many months, dating back to last year. That's a good point. It's a very good point that the back end of that rotation is very vulnerable, like we kind of predicted it would be. I would say, though, to counter that, is that I think that even though Kevin Gausman's numbers don't quite pop off, that he's been a lot better than last year. I think that if you look at his numbers, they're very similar, but I think just the process and the underlying metrics certainly look a lot better. I think Chris Bassett, his underlying metrics and his raw stats look a whole lot better. Jose Barrios, as he's always been, a steady rock, kind of what you're going to get there. So I think that despite the fact that they're vulnerable at the back end of that rotation, I think that the front end has sort of been performed to par or slightly above par than what we were expecting. So that's always good. And I think that ultimately reinforcements will be on the way. Spencer Turnbull, he's a guy who's ramping up right now. Hopefully by the middle to end of next month, he'll be a guy who's going to be making starts for them, which obviously you feel a little bit better about that compared to the Jose Urena, Eric Lauer of it all. Alek Manoah at one point figures to pitch. What are you going to get out of him? That's a mixed bag, but ultimately he's a guy with some pedigree, not the kind of guys you're throwing out there. Maybe he captures a little bit from what he had earlier prior to his injury. And, obviously you have a chance to go out there and make a move at the deadline. So I think in terms of the back end of the rotation, it's better to be concerned about the back end rather than the front end, because that's always the easier fix. The bullpen, I think there's 2 schools of thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm not that surprised that they're 10th in bullpen WAR, to be completely honest with you, because I've always been in the mindset that bullpens are volatile. It's very possible you can have a good bullpen.
Because you also wouldn't have been surprised if they were 28th.
Right, exactly. That's my point. That's it. Exactly. That goes to my whole point of volatility. Like, it could go up and down, and I think that you have enough talent in that back end of that bullpen to feel decent about it. Like it's been, the bullpen's been a legitimate strength this year. But ultimately, the other side of the coin is what's going to happen if the offense keeps not blowing teams out like it has all year. And we saw what we saw against Cleveland and the Angels, where they're forced to have a high workload and pitch on short days rest and ultimately be ineffective because of that. So I think that's a legitimate concern as well. And the offense, I think that we've got so many episodes about the offense all year. You really know what you're going to get. I mean, obviously, you're hoping that it'll be somewhat similar to what's been lately. And obviously, Santander and Vlad, you expect them to hit a lot more bombs. And, hopefully George Springer keeps us up. And even Bo Bichette, he's a guy who
Right.
he can be a little bit better than what he's shown so far. I think we could all agree on that.
Yep.
So there's things to be bullish about. But ultimately, when we know this offense, it's ultimately their ceiling because of their lack of power, just ultimately not all that high. So yeah, I basically what I did was essentially synthesize all your points and expanded them and talk about why you should be bullish and why you shouldn't be on every aspect of the team. And yeah, that's why we're here at a 500 team a quarter of the way through the year.
Yeah, I completely agree. But in just speaking with the volatility, especially after 40 games, I have a perfect encapsulation of what that would look like. Last podcast, which was less than a week ago, the best players on our team were pitchers. It was Jeff Hoffman, who led in Baseball Reference WAR, and then it went Chris Bassett and Jose Barrios. You look up the best players right now for the Jays in Baseball Reference WAR a week later, and it's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and George Springer and Andres Jimenez. So like literally 3 hitters a week later because of the offense, because of the Jeff Hoffman thing in LA, and just a bunch of factors. But the point is that 40 games, despite us having this conversation, is going to be continuously volatile for the next 40 games probably until we actually have a true picture on what this team is going to look like at the end of September. So yeah. This segues perfectly into let's check in on our preseason over-unders. We said we were going to check in on them, and I will be honest, after going back through this episode and writing down all of our over-unders and what our takes were, I do understand if anybody was confused on how I had this team at 84 wins, because You'll see. You'll see. And if you aren't confused, well, then that's great. But Rob was confused in the episode, and he probably had a right to be. So here is the first one. Vlad, Baseball Reference WAR, you set the line at 5.25. We all had the over, or no, James had the over. I had the over. And you had the under, and right now you would be on pace to be right because obviously through 40 games, Vlad has a 0.9 Baseball Reference WAR, which puts him on pace for about 3.6, 3.7 at the end of 162, which would be a very disappointing year from Vlad. And
here's the counter, though. The counter, though, is that we all expect him to be better, right? The counter is that we all expect him to be better, and the fact that he has played to a level of almost a 1-win player, 40 games in, close to a 4-win player, I think that that's still one that, even though I'm looking ahead right now, I wouldn't be surprised if that's at the end of the year that kind of goes into your favor a bit. I'm hoping for the team's sake that it does, but ultimately, I'm not quite taking victory laps on that one just yet, is my point.
Yeah. If he has less than a 5.25 WAR, then my prediction of the wins is going to be correct, but I will be wrong on the Vlad WAR, so it won't matter. Scherzer innings pitched. We set the line at 109.5.
Now I'm taking victory laps for.
That one's obviously not happening. James took the under. You took the under. I took the over, and that was bad.
And sorry, what was the number again?
109.5.
109.5. Okay, so I thought I put it at 99.5. I got a little bit ambitious there. Obviously that's I tried to sort of smooth my victory in a bit, my projection of this one. There's no smoothing. That's just that's a bad call, Prof. And obviously considering we knew Max Scherzer being given his age and his injury history and the fact that he was literally dealing with an injury at the time of this over-under. Yeah,
he wasn't. At the time of the recording of the podcast, he was not. He had actually just pitched. He had a great start. It was great.
Right, it was, but we knew that this thumb thing had been lingering, and the reports were that it's not bothering him at the moment, but we knew that it was somewhere there in the back of their mind. So no, it's a questionable one in hindsight, Prof. There's no defending this one, pal.
The next up was Gausman ERA plus, which you set the line at 118.5. James took the over. I took the over. You took the over. Clean sweep. He's currently at 101.
Yeah.
Despite how great he's been to start the year, it's been probably a bit favorable to the ballparks.
Yeah, and obviously ERA plus captures that, so you wouldn't be able to hide from that. I do think that ERA plus, and given that's a small sample, it's a little bit volatile. If you ask me without looking at the numbers, I would say that Kevin Goslin's pitched to a level greater than a 101 ERA plus just from the eye
Right, me
test. I
too.
do think he's been a lot better than that number would suggest. I
I was
think that
shocked.
in awful cataclysmic inning at Yankee Stadium has a lot to do with where that number is. So I think this one sort of similar to Vlad, currently in the lead for myself. However, I do feel like this is one that could turn. And once again, for the Blue Jays' sake, I hope that it does.
Yeah, no, we all took the over. So,
Oh right, I
yeah,
took the okay. Yeah,
we
no.
all
So
took the over.
basically,
Yeah.
then my analysis would be that I still feel I feel overly I don't feel overly confident, but I still feel pretty confident this could kind of being a win.
Yeah. The next up was Anthony Santander home runs, which the line was set at 32.5. I took the over. James took the under. You took the over. I don't know about you, but I'm still confident in that over.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100% because like we mentioned, Anthony Santander's home run total this year, where it was last year, was very similar. They're very similar to each other. So
Right.
I think you could definitely expect Anthony Santander to hit a lot of bombs at Rogers Center through the summer months, and hopefully it's more than 32 and a half. So yeah, I think right now it doesn't look good, but I'm bullish that it could get better.
Next up, Springer at bats. Over under 514.5. James took the over. I took the under. Rob, you took the over. Right now, despite how hot he's been, he is actually only on pace for 572 plate appearances. So, there is a world where I still might be right. If he, falls off and Barger plays him and Lucas plays him or Straw plays him and he falls off, then and Santander obviously gets hot. There is still a pathway for me to be right, but based off of the start that he's had, he's probably going to be an everyday player for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think at this point, like he's going to be the everyday player for a while. I'm not sure I see a scenario where he's not an everyday player the rest of the year because he would have to really fall off to the point where he's being like taken out of the lineup for the Miles Straws, the Nathan Lucases of the world. I think that's considering where he is right now with a well over 900
Right.
OPS and just crushing the ball like he has been recently. It's hard to envision that. I think the more obvious path to victory for you, it's funny to say this way, is an injury. It's an injury that
Yeah.
caused him to miss 6 weeks. So ultimately, you have what? The
Or
current
or
pace that
the
he's
or
on.
the or this is because this I think people should go back and watch the episode because I also attached a caveat to my under prediction here with George Springer. I said he's not going to have he might not have 514 and a half plate appearances for the Toronto Blue Jays in 2025. He might get traded before then. This version of Springer is tradable if the Jays are out of it in July.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point as well. But ultimately, if he's has enough value where one team's willing to take on his contract for what's it going to be at that time, it would be like close to 40 million for the next year and change. Like I would imagine that if you're going to make that kind of investment, you'd want him playing every day.
Well, but
It's
he,
kind of
and he
hard to
will
believe
be,
that you wouldn't.
but by July he won't have 514 plate appearances.
Sure, that's possible as well. But ultimately, I think that yeah, it's a narrow victory for us so far. But yeah, you're still very much in play, no doubt.
Next up was the Penn Fangraphs War ranking. So would you be 18 and a half was the line? So would they be 19th in the league or would they be 18th in the league? Right now,
Yeah.
as I said earlier in the podcast, they are 10th in the league. James took the under, as in he was expecting them to be better than 18th. I took the over, as I was expecting them to be worse than 18th. Worse than 19th. And then Rob took the under, expecting them to be better than 18th. And right now, they are much better than I think any of us thought. Yeah.
Yep. No, I'm very confident. I'm very confident they're going to be higher than, or pardon me, lower than 18 and a half because I think there's too many guys who miss bats. Obviously Jimmy Garcia, Jeff Hoffman, when they're healthy and not overused, they miss a ton of bats. That's an elite 8-9, as we saw the first month of the year, first month and change, and even the ancillary guys. You have a Brendan Little, a guy who me
Yeah,
personally was a
I
little
was,
dubious on.
and I no, but I
Yeah,
also, like part of my analysis during that was saying that we don't have a competent lefty, and Brandon
yeah.
Little, at least right now, looks like a competent lefty.
Oh, and I think like in terms of like the overall metrics, like, he's
Yeah.
more than competent. Like
Yeah.
he's missing bats to a rate that like no lefty in baseball is missing bats at in terms of coming out of the pen. So that helps. Nick Sandlin's a guy when he gets back, he's gonna miss a lot of bats. He strikes a lot of guys out. Even Mason Fluharty came up and is doing his thing there. Eric Swanson at some point will come back, and ultimately, if the Jays are in it, which we expect them to be in July, they're going to add another guy, whoever that may be, and who's going to project to miss bats as well. So ultimately, I think that there's a lot of reasons to think that this can sort of be sustainable. That's not just a flash in the pan. Obviously, bullpens are always volatile, so there's always going to be that element, that fear in the back of your mind that it could blow up, which it has been a little bit the last week or so. But ultimately, I think that there's enough talent in Japan for it to be, at the very least, the 18th best bullpen in baseball, which is what the prop is.
Yeah. Next up, Bo Hits. He's been the leadoff hitter from day one, and he has been producing at a leadoff production. I took the over on 176.5. James took the over. You took the under. Currently, he's on pace for 192, which would be in contention for the league leader in the AL once again, which he has done twice already in his career. Rob, you thought that he would still have a great year and would be around 176, but you did take the under. But James and I look to be definitely on pace for the winning that one.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, one thing that Bo's definitely done well this season, he's gotten a lot of hits. That's one thing that you want him to do. To me, his numbers, they look a little lower. His production, because of the extra base hits haven't quite been there. Specifically the home runs, because he's only sitting at 2. He had a second one just the other day. So hopefully he can get that 20 plus home run stroke back, because that would obviously mean a lot for the team. But in terms of just getting base hits and hitting the ball hard, like, yeah, he's done that great. As you mentioned, on pace for close to 200 hits, on pace to be amongst the league leaders in the American League for hits once again. Yeah, I think that right now you guys are looking pretty good on that one.
And don't get me wrong, I would definitely take some hits away to have some of those hits be doubles and home runs, because his numbers are not great right now, even with the fact that he is on pace for 192 hits. He is too close to a Luis Arias for me and my liking, being a hopefully future Toronto Blue Jay shortstop for the next decade. So yeah, I would definitely subtract some hits and be sweating out this bed if I could just get some more home runs from the guy. Our next up was a complicated one. It was the surprise OPS plus guy from Buffalo, basically. Would this guy have a 110 OPS plus, and would he get to 350 at-bats? Right now, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Addison Barger is definitely the favorite, but even he, for two reasons that won't get it, is he's not on pace for those at-bats, and he is not at a 110 OPS plus yet. He's at like a 101, I think, or 106 or something like that. He's in the 100 single digits. James said no. I said yes, and Rob said yes. So we do think someone's going to be that guy. We both thought it was going to be Broden, obviously earning the opening day start. But now the two of us would agree with each other again and say we expect Addison Barger to finish with 350 at-bats and hopefully a 110 OPS plus.
Yeah, I mean, you're very confident. You want him to be the two-hitter starting next week. So yeah, I would hope that you're confident about that one.
Yeah. And the last one was wins. 85.5. I took the under. James took the over. You took the under. Both you and I are on the right pace because they're on pace for 81. But here's where I've realized that my predictions probably don't equal the win total that I had, is because if I was right on all these things, then we would be on pace for more than 85.5 wins, I think. So yeah. I think it would be close. If I was right about everything, we'd probably be on pace for like 90 wins. So yeah probably should have changed some of my predictions. But I will say this to defend myself a little bit. While the process didn't equal the result, I was more confident going into that podcast on the win total than what I was about a lot of the how we get to those wins. I will say that. Like if you wanted me to rank my over-unders, at the top of that list would have been where I think we finish. I do, like, that is what I was most confident in, because I just didn't trust the rotation, I didn't trust the pen, I didn't trust the power output from the offense, like all of those things. And today, all of those things still exist.
Are valid. Yeah, I was going to say.
All of those things still exist. So that's why I am still confident in the under at the end of the year. I do still think we're not going to get to 85 or 86 wins. But yeah, I do agree that when you talk about the process. I was wrong on some of my evaluations there.
Yeah, no, and I think I made that point when we set the over-unders. I think the bigger point is, and obviously I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I said the number's pretty good. I mean, obviously every over-under is alive except for the Max Scherzer one. Really, that's the only one that's dead at this
Right.
point. So obviously, a quarter of the way through the year, the fact that we're debating all of these and that we it could go, all of them could really go either way. If we're being honest, like not a whole lot needs to happen one way or another for it to come true. So yeah, I think that maybe. Yeah, I'll give myself a bit of a pat on the back for the over-unders. And in terms
Yeah.
of the win total, look, I mean, obviously 500 team, you're on pace for 81 wins. Like I mentioned earlier, you win tomorrow, all of a sudden you're on pace for pretty close to that over-under. And that's, like we mentioned, not a whole lot it doesn't feel like a whole lot has gone right this season. And it feels like we're due for, at the very least, maybe, dare I say, some positive regression with the offense that could perhaps catapult them over to 85.5, which, by the way, I can speak for both of us. We would both be happy to be wrong on that one and have them win more than 85 games and get into the playoffs and make these podcasts a lot more fun than they were a year ago during the summer months.
100%, 100%. And perfectly, that goes into what's coming up. What's this offense going to look like going forward? So let's preview the homestand. 9 games at home, and honestly, it's not going to be easy. We got Detroit for 3. We got Tampa Bay for 3 first. We got Detroit for 3, and then we got San Diego for 3. Detroit and San Diego well above 500 teams, and Tampa, despite being a below 500 team, had us 9-4 in the season series last year. Obviously, they're a division rival. Obviously, we hate playing the Rays. So all of those things, it's going to be a tough homestand. The one thing that I'd like to point out that I think could lead to a very good offensive output over the next 10 days, because we do have an off day in between there, is this. It looks like we're going to miss Scooble.
Yep.
That's huge. Obviously, the guy who won the Triple Crown last year and won the AL Cy Young Award.
Arguably the best pitcher in baseball.
Arguably the best pitcher in baseball outside of Paul Skeens. And we have our best 3 starters going against Tampa.
Yep.
Now, that does line us up with Detroit with the 4th and 5th spot, which who knows how that goes. With a great lineup in Detroit with Bound Francis, who knows how that goes at home. But yeah, we've been better at home so far this year. Anthony Santander should be back. Andres Jimenez should be back. Dalton Varsho obviously should get a full homestand. And we should miss one of the 2 best pitchers in baseball. So hopefully, being at home over the next 9 days with the warmer weather, maybe the dome will open up over those 10 days. I expect
the weather's as good as it is now.
Yeah, I expect. Let's say this: I expect more than 3.6 runs, which is what we averaged for the first month and change. I don't know if I expect 5.2 runs over the next 10 days, which is what we've averaged so far in May. But yeah, I do expect better offense over the next 10 days. I just hope, because the pitching is what I'm worried about. So I hope that the pitching can hold pat.
So you're looking at the matchups, and ultimately you had a reeling Tampa Bay Rays team coming to town. We have our best 3 starters going, and then you have Detroit coming in, the team with right now has the best record in the American League, and we have our 4 and 5s pitching in that series, and then subsequently the San Diego Padres, who are one of the best teams in baseball, are coming in. I think it's only logical, Prof, and hear me out. It's only logical that it goes as follows: that they get swept by Tampa, lose the next 3 with their best 3 starters, and they win the series against Detroit and San Diego. And then in the end of this whole stretch, they're a 500 team, as they are. Because they can never be a marked departure from 500, but yet they get there in the most questionable ways possible. So I think that's the only logical prediction.
Yep, that is what I expect. I said on the last podcast that despite the fact that all these guys have increased offensive output in May, and it's very large, like the Bows of the world, the Santanders of the world, the Springers of the world. You look at this core for the last 5 years, and this team's a 500 team in May. And that's every iteration of this team. Even the 2021 Bombers that we had who led the league in hard hit percentage, they also were a 500 team roughly in May. So yeah, I'm with you, Rob. I expect us at the end of these 9 games to probably go 4 and 5. Because that's what we're going to do.
Never mark departure from 500. Hopefully it's better. Hopefully it's better, and hopefully it's definitely not worse. But yeah I think that's a reasonable expectation given what we've seen as a Toronto Blue Jays fan the last few years. And also the problem is that what has always been one disturbing trend about this team is that whenever they take a step forward, there just always seems to be an instant step backwards. So I'm fully preparing myself for impact. I'm fully preparing myself to be disappointed in this race series, despite the fact, like, on paper, we should be winning this series, right? We have our best three starters. The Rays are really struggling. They're a team that, like the Jays, are having really trouble hitting the ball. So, in theory, we should win. But ultimately, we all know we've seen too many Tampa Bay Rays games over these. I mean, for me personally, a decade and a half now to know that you can never take those games for granted, and that typically, more often than not, you'll end up disappointed and underwhelmed. So, I'm taking a cautious approach to this upcoming series against Tampa.
Yeah. Some news and notes at the end of this podcast. There's an updated top 100 prospects in baseball, and according to the two most respected lists, MLB Pipelines and Baseball Americas, the Jays have 2 or 3 top 100 prospects. Arjun Amala and Trey Savage, 2 guys that are unquestionably in both of those lists. The guy who is only on one of those lists, but was on the other list last year, is Ricky Tiedemann. The reason why he's not on MLB Pipelines is obviously because of his injury, but Baseball America still has him on in the top 100. So some bright spots for the farm. I will keep that report for James when he comes back from playing baseball. And if you thought Bo Bichette had a chance to win Comeback Player of the Year for the American League going into the year, and you got him at, I don't know, I think it was close to plus 1,000. You can get him right now at plus 2,300. Because right now the favorite is Jacob deGrom, who's been lights out. But as we know, Jacob deGrom, just like Max Scherzer, he has not been able to put up a healthy season in years. So I would still think that getting 23-1 at FanDuel on Bo Bichette to get Comeback Player of the Year is plenty of value. And for anybody that wants to call me a coward, I'm taking it. I took it before the season. I'm going to take it again before tomorrow hits, because going back home, I don't want the odds to shift. But yeah, I am taking it. Rob, do you have anything to finish off the show?
Go Jays. That ultimately, here's what I'll say is that as frustrating as this team has been during the lifespan of this podcast specifically, I think that it's always good to have a polarizing team that has the roller coasters up and downs, that makes for good content. Obviously, we saw what it was last year, and it was just a miserable climb to the end of the year, specifically after the middle of June, really. So the Jays are right now in position, and hopefully it continues, that it's going to be compelling baseball one way or another up until the very end. Hopefully that's the case. And ultimately, this was a good series. Obviously, as Jays fans, we know that there's going to be a lot of peaks and valleys. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to be upset. Right now, just enjoy it while we have it. It's been a fun weekend in Seattle, and hopefully that continues. Home this week against Tampa and Detroit, and obviously San Diego, and hopefully we get some open air baseball, which is always good to see. So yeah, that's all I got for you right now, man.
Yeah, despite what Rob said about how this Tampa series is going to go, there is no reason to not tune in to the Tampa series. Your best 3 starters are going. The team is coming off of a 4-game winning streak. You just swept Seattle in Seattle. You're scoring runs. You have to. No, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about Jays fans.
Right.
If you think that you should be down on this team right now and you're not ready to tune in, Leafs playoffs are happening. I get it, but there's no better time to tune in than this Tampa series. At least until it starts. Who knows what happens in Game 1? But yes, do tune in to the Tampa series starting tomorrow night. For Rob Pantelimon, I was Cole Whiston. You were listening to the Blue Jays Center podcast presented by the Sick Podcast Network. Let's go, Jays.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Blue Jays Center on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.